Hello, and welcome to our very first episode of the Tell Not Show. I'm your host, Julia J.K. Allen, and this is Kirsha Fox. And we're so excited to have you on. We have a wonderful guest lined up tonight who's being so patient while we go through our first show nerves. So Kirsha Fox is my favorite author of this year, and a newly published author at that. She just released her debut novel, The Son of Deception, and she's a homeschooling mother to four and a tabletop gamer.
All right. And Julia Allen is an editor, author, and author coach extraordinaire.
We're so excited to have you on, or have you join us today for our first episode. And we wanted to start out kind of just by introducing what the show is about, what we're about, and some news in the book talk community for this week. So, like Kirsha so kindly said, I'm revealing the name of our guest already. I am Julia J.K. Allen, so I'm an author, editor, and I also do author coaching and some other author services. I have been doing this, I've been writing for forever, since I learned how to write. And I'm super excited to do this show with my dear friend Kirsha Fox. We kind of got the idea of talking about different writing journeys because there's more than one way up the mountain. So it was very important for us to kind of showcase all the different ways to get there and talk about the different struggles along the journey for other authors coming up. Do you want to add anything, Kirsha? Tell us a little bit more about yourself.
You had it done pretty well, actually.
Oh, yeah.
Yes. Julia first brought up this idea, and at first I was like, no way. But the more I thought about it, the more I loved the idea of helping other authors along in their journey. No matter what stage you're at, we are always learning, we're always lifting each other up. And so that's our goal, help lift each other up.
Yes. And so we have projects that we're working on. I am working on, I just re-released Half-Blood Alliance, which is a book that was very dear to me when I wrote it. It's about a character who I can see a lot of myself in. And it had a short run the first time around, we'll just put it that way. And so getting it back out was like a really passion project for me. And so I've been working on the rest of the series to finish that out and get those books out. And then editing and doing all the fun stuff. I get to read books before other people see it. Who doesn't love that, right?
It's a nice perk for sure.
Yeah. What are you working on, Kirsha?
I am working on the second book in my series called The White Leaf Child. It's with beta readers right now, and just I love getting their feedback and seeing if I'm misleading them properly. And
I mean, with a book called The Son of Deception, we have to have a little sleight of hands here and
yes,
there, right?
there's going to be some deception in there.
All right, wonderful. And as far as good news on the interwebs, we did see a story about an author who was lamenting the fact that nobody came to their book signing, or only two people came to their book signing. Is
Two
that correct?
people came. Yes, her name is Chelsea Banning, and her story has just been all over. She posted to Twitter about only two people showed up to her book signing when she was expecting somewhere around 40. Like 40 people all said they were coming to her book signing, and only two showed up. And before she knew it, Neil Gaiman was commenting. Robin Hobb, Minji Lee, Margaret E. Atwood, all of these really famous authors started commenting about their worst book signings, their worst readings, just being really encouraging, really sweet. And even Stephen King was saying, "Let us know when your next book signing is. We'll all show up." And what does she do with her newfound fame? She's been using it to shine light on other new authors, and it's just been the most heartwarming story to follow this week.
It is, because there's usually some drama going on, and so it's nice when it's a feel-good story.
It's nice when it's a good drama.
Yeah, for sure. All right, so let's welcome our guest on, Vicky L. Holt. has been writing for over 2 decades. An avid reader herself, she loves nothing better than appreciating a well turned phrase. With 14 books and novellas published so far, quite an accomplishment, she's been trying to turn out excellent phrases for a while now.
Mm-hmm.
Her work has appeared in literary journals and websites, as well as on Amazon and store and library shelves. Miss Holt is a mother and grandmother and dubious owner of a wild golden doodle who eats entire pizzas. Same, same golden
Same.
doodle, same.
We've all been there.
Yeah.
I
Uh,
cannot understate how excited I am to be interviewing Vicky L. Holt. I read her books, like about a year ago now, and I was just absolutely blown away. Science fiction romance is not a genre that I have read very much in. I kind of went in with like really low expectations, and she just absolutely blew my mind. Her characters are like fiery and knowledgeable. They're so smart. I felt like I was learning just from reading these books about geology and
oh, wow.
botany and all these things that her characters are into. I love it. It's very much the heroine saves herself kind of
Love
thing,
those. Yeah.
but they still fall in love, which is really sweet. She's an absolute master of slow burn. I
Oh, yeah.
yeah, if you want to study slow burn, you should definitely read Vicky L. Holt's books. I can't emphasize how good she is at that. Anyway, should we go ahead and bring her on?
Yeah. So, welcome, Vicky. Thank you so much for
Welcome,
joining us.
Vicky.
Hi, thank you for that glowing endorsement. I feel like I'm blushing and giggle blush. Thank you. Very
Right.
kind.
Thank you so much for being on with us for our very first episode.
If I could just say something about that,
Absolutely.
I feel like I'm a good luck charm for you. There is speaking of literary journals, there is one called Segula, Segullah, that I have submitted a couple essays and had published in them before. I had taken a photograph of a foggy morning, and they actually used that photograph on their very first issue.
Oh,
And that was like 10 years ago or 15 years ago, and they're still going strong. So I'm your good luck
You're a good
charm.
luck charm.
well, thank you so much for being on here. We really appreciate the good luck. Yes.
We could use it.
Yeah, we really could. I did want to, like I said, we wanted to do this show because author journeys are as different as people on the world. So why don't you tell us a little bit about how you got started in your writing journey?
Excuse me. I tried to find my first bound book. The cover was made out of baby Wonder Woman wallpaper,
Okay.
and the title was Poosie's Magic Friends.
Mm-hmm.
Poosie. I can't imagine what my parents thought when I came up with this
How old
name.
were you when you made your first book?
I don't like 7 or I don't know. It was really it was
Right.
really little. So just I've always been an imaginative kid. Then going through school, having teachers recognize something in me made a huge impact, especially in high school. There were a couple of English teachers, Mr. Petroff and Mr. Rusk, who encouraged me and told me to keep going and keep writing. And let's see, part of my journey, I would have to say, began with reading. I taught myself to read at age 4 with a little Aesop's fables. So all the titles were really simple, like the old man and the fox, or the ape and the dog. And so I think that's why it was easy for me to pick up on what those words were. And then just devouring books from a young
Absolutely.
age. The school library was where I preferred to hang out. And then I would have to say the advent of self-publishing really broadened my world, because now there was every possible configuration of book out there. It was affordable.
Yeah.
I read some doozies. I read some really bad ones, but I also read some really great ones. And so that amalgamation, this spectrum of talent, made it approachable for me
Right.
to be more serious about, well, maybe I should do this.
Mm-hmm. And when did you write your first published work?
That would be 2013.
Mm-hmm.
It was my debut novel. It was the first in a trilogy. Major author mistake. It ended in a terrible cliffhanger. I still feel bad about that.
I think that was a common trend, I think, at first. And then everyone hated them so much that now we as authors are like, okay, we'll be a little kinder, not do
Yeah.
that as much. Yeah. So you write scientific romance, right? Sci-fi romance.
Mm-hmm.
So what do you love about your genre in particular?
Oh my gosh. Let me
Loaded
just
question.
let me just say I
You don't
was
have to pick one thing. That's impossible.
well, I was really I was a really cocky writer at the beginning,
Mm.
kind of full of myself. And I had this goal: I'm going to get published in every genre. And I actually started doing that. I have a couple of cozy mystery novellas. I've got 3 sweet contemporary. I've got my YA paranormal trilogy.
Mm.
Um, then I had an idea for a sci-fi romance. Uh, I have to give credit where credit's due. I read Ruby Dixon's Ice Planet
Mm.
Barbarian series.
Who didn't?
I read that in 2016. 2018 is when I wrote and finished my first science fiction romance. And I fell in love with the genre. For
Mm.
me, it was rekindling a love of science. I had forgotten the little kid that I was. I was always laying on the ground, watching bugs, collecting bugs, eating wild clover. My parents got me this. I don't know if you remember, like the Betty Crocker recipe collection in the box, the big plastic box. There was a company that would send animal cards, and my parents got me this subscription where you get a little card in the mail of an animal and learn about where it lived in the world. All of a sudden, as I'm researching for my novels, I remembered how much joy I got from studying just science in general.
Right.
And then, of course, everything I've ever written has been romance because I got to have my happy ever after.
It's
So.
definitely your strong suit for sure.
I love that goal. I know you say it comes from like a place of like cockiness, but you know, there's a certain bluster and confidence I feel as authors we need to have, right? Because we need humility, of course, and we need to be humble so that we can always improve and grow. But I love that you just have the goal of like I'm gonna write romance in every genre and just like are knocking that out.
Well, if I had to do it over, I would at least do myself the favor of switching pen names per genre.
I can understand that struggle. Yeah, a lot of people talk about pen names. I love that you kind of brought up one of our questions that we wanted to be asking people of what are some common mistakes that you made in the beginning of your career that you can kind of like advise others to avoid?
Well, as I mentioned with my bravado or
Mm-hmm.
whatever, um, I had kind of a terrible attitude about accepting criticism.
Mm-hmm.
So it took me a few years and some rounds of actual professional edits
Right.
and some negative reviews to realize, oh, I'm not all that in a bag of chips. Um, but it was it was a necessary lesson for me.
Yeah.
And I've come away. I was with a traditional publisher for a few years, and that was instrumental in teaching me to accept criticism and to open my mind to the possibility that maybe the way that I developed the story was weak and needed to be strengthened, needed to be shored up. It was a super valuable lesson. So I would say number one mistake that an author could make would be assuming that their book didn't need to be polished or didn't need to be edited.
That's a good one. I was
I
talking about
completely
this.
agree.
Yeah, I was talking about this the other day where I think it's very important for us, not just as authors, but as people, to learn how to make mistakes, right? It's something that like everyone makes mistakes, but like to learn how to do it with grace and understanding. Is that
Yeah.
Accepting criticism, accepting, other people's uh, advice.
right?
And yes, I have definitely fallen to that as well, where I look at my manuscript that's newly self edited and I'm like, I don't even know why I'm getting this edited. Like, it's perfect. And then if there isn't a dozen mistakes every single line,
It happens to all of us.
yes,
Well, yeah, and part of it is like we know what's in our head, so we're seeing it on the page when it's not necessarily on the page yet.
Yes,
exactly.
that happens a lot.
Yes. Writing books is definitely not a solo activity. You need to find your own village, your own group to help you. For
For
sure.
sure. Yeah. How would you describe your writing process?
I love talking about process. I love hearing other authors describe their process. Before I really got serious about writing and completing and publishing novels, I had the grand luck to tune into an NPR episode where they were interviewing. Uh, oh shoot, his name escapes me. Um, Miss Wyoming is the title of the book. And sorry, I can't think of the author's name. They asked him, "How did you come up with the name Colgate for the heroine in the story?" And he was like, "Oh, it was so random. I was going down the street, and one of the off streets was named Colgate." And I'm like, "Oh, that would be a great name." Well, she's a model in the story, and so that little bit of serendipity, where a beautiful model whose last name is Colgate, you think of toothpaste, you think of shiny white teeth. So I love the little bits and pieces that come together when you're creating a work. For my process specifically, I see the ideas unfolding in my mind much like I watching a movie. And so I will kind of witness the scene as it happens, and I'll narrate it in my head, and then I'm typing that scene as I see it. What's interesting is I've had readers tell me that my books read like movies. So somehow
Okay.
that process is being translated on page.
Yeah, you have a very cinematic style, it sounds like.
I completely would agree with that.
And
She very much does.
Ah, I love it. And we both Kirsha and I Googled and we found out it's Douglas Coupland.
thank you.
Yes, who wrote
Uh,
Mr. Blooming. Yeah.
it started me on a round of reading all of his books, and I recommend. They're literary, but fantastic.
Okay, I definitely have to check into that. I love getting recommendations for new books. Now it's just to find the time to read, right? That's the struggle,
Yeah.
especially for writers. It's like, okay, I have free time. Do I write or do I read or what? um, what So we talked a little bit about like as a new author struggling with accepting criticism or critiques and other how difficult that is to learn. What else would you What else? What other advice do you have for starting authors?
Um, let's see.
Yeah.
Let me
If a young
think.
person came to you and said, "Hey, I wrote a book. What do I do now?"
Mm-hmm.
Uh, definitely, definitely seek out, as we had talked about previously, edits. The thing about starting out is you usually don't feel like you're justified in spending a lot of money on
Right.
your project. So, I mean, you can ask your English teacher or professor. Maybe you could call in some favors, but you really mustn't assume that your manuscript is clean.
Mhm.
Um,
Right, but there are workarounds
Yeah.
if you don't have access to an editor.
Friends, writer
right.
groups.
Mhm.
Um,
Writer groups are a great resource to reach out to.
So, and specifically, you want to look for like a developmental edit to
Mm-hmm.
make sure that you have um, paced your work appropriately, not too slow, not too fast. You want to make sure there aren't inconsistencies, potholes,
yeah.
um, and something that I've thought about is, what is your goal as a writer?
Mm-hmm.
So some of us, I think we envision the cover with our name is bigger than the title, which you see some
Right.
books like that, like
Isn't
Leave
that the goal,
Child or
though? That is absolutely the goal.
uh, I, I mean, I think there might be writers out there who just write for the creative aspect of
Mhm.
it.
Right, right.
But for me, yeah, it's definitely financial is a big motivator for me. Um, Keeping that in mind, you need to study your market. So if you have written a fantasy novel, or if you've written a reverse harem sci-fi romance, study your market and find out what is what everyone is doing. And it sounds a little bit like you're copying, but if your goal is financial success, then you need to follow the rules of the
You need to
game.
know your market.
Right. It's
You need
kind of
to
like
know where the demand is and what's doing well.
absolutely. It's kind of like we when we say like you have to know the rules to break them, right? We can't
Yeah.
just go and willy nilly doing anything. And the same applies to tropes and other things that make a book like well known as a story to us, like just how we subconsciously know like 3x structures and things like that. These are stuff that like if we know and understand, then we can play around with as authors. But it's getting to that level of familiarity at first. Absolutely. Um, so how did you like so when you knew you wanted to get published and write a novel, like how did you tackle that process of going from like I want to write a book, so what do I do?
Well, I'm kind of old. So when I first started this journey, it was before Amazon, if you can believe
Mm-hmm.
that there was a time before Amazon.
We're not that young, unfortunately. We grew
Yeah,
up
we
after
unfortunately
Amazon.
very well know the world before Amazon.
my son was asking me something today. Oh, just about my child. Did I get in trouble when I was a kid? And I was
Right.
mentioning how I played outside all the time. We didn't have cell phones. We didn't have computers. We didn't have gaming systems. He's like, "Did you have cars?" So,
How old are you?
sometime after the advent of cars, but before the advent of Amazon,
Mm-hmm.
um, I have. Are you familiar with the writer's market?
Yeah.
This gigantic book. Um, my husband would buy me a copy for Christmas, and I would pore over that thing. And that's how I ended up published in some literary journals, because I found the
Mm-hmm.
titles in the writer's market, and I would write some stories that I thought would fit what they wanted. I queried publishers, I queried agents. So that was That was the dark ages. And that's when I experienced failure for the first time and rejection. Then self publishing became a thing. And even then, I didn't start writing yet. There was a stigma. Um, but over time, as I read more and more books, and I mentioned, there were some not so well written books out there, especially in the early days, but also some really fantastic stories that still have stayed with me. And that's kind of when I felt inspired, and of course I should mention that my husband has always been like, you should totally do it. You should write. He bought me a computer, and he's always made sure that I had a functioning laptop. Uh, so just the actual, writing the book in and of itself wasn't the big obstacle so much as just the learning curve.
Right.
But let's see, I had kind of written myself some notes. I'm not sure where I wrote this before, but I wanted to say that any help that I got, any success that I got, any opportunities was because of networking, which
Yeah.
I find interesting because writing is such a solitary pursuit.
Right.
But I really can credit so many um, interconnections with the friends that I've met in the industry and so many authors, and that's how I was able to experience many of the opportunities that I've had.
This is absolutely a journey that you cannot do alone. Yeah. You need to find your people.
Yes.
Right. It's so important. And I love your story that your, husband supported you so much through your writing. Yeah, it's so nice to hear because so often, I've done other shows where I've interviewed people and they usually have the opposite to say where they don't have the support at home. And some, even have stories of like family members trying to sabotage their writing. And it's just like, oh my goodness, like let people have joy.
Yeah.
So, Vicky, here's a fun question about time management, organization. How do you, as a very busy mother, find time to write and to organize your thoughts?
Insert maniacal laugh.
Right.
That's,
I
that's about
was
what I was
just
expecting.
I was just diagnosed with ADHD 2 years ago.
Same.
Best thing that ever happened to me, because now I had a scientific explanation for my complete and utter lack of organizational skills and time management. That being said, uh, knowing knowing how my brain works now, I've actually increased my productivity and my ability to organize my time. It's not because I magically fixed my brain. It's because I've been learning how my specific neurodivergence is and trying to work with it. So I have a planner and I write everything down. I utilize timers. I try to keep all of my notes in one place. They used to be scattered all over the house, and now everything goes in the planner. Everything, dentist appointments, newsletter signups, like everything is on there. And I've basically externalized my brain, and that is what's working for me right now.
That's wonderful. Really
That
good
is
advice for
good.
someone who has ADHD or lacks their own management yet.
Yeah, I think it's really important because, like, when you struggle with things like ADHD and other neurodivergencies, it's like a lot of times growing up, you were just told, like, oh, you just need to try, or you're so smart, just apply
Yeah, just try
yourself.
harder, just work
Yeah.
harder.
Just
And
apply
without that
yourself.
understanding of the brain structure is different, therefore the thinking processes are different. Therefore, like I don't have it figured out the same way you do, and just trying isn't, always so helpful
Yeah, amen.
without guidance. Yeah, I love that. You found solutions because, like, a lot of people are like, oh, if I don't acknowledge a difference or some what's going on, then then I don't have to worry about it. But a lot of times, like having that answer, having that answer means you can find the solutions for us, problems you didn't even know were, running around in your head. So
Yeah.
I love that.
Well, and even just for me, just having explanations like, oh
Mhm.
yeah,
Absolutely.
your brain isn't producing serotonin, and so that's why you're sitting in front of your screen not doing anything at all, even though you've got 100 things on your to-do
Right,
list and you can't
right.
get the motivation to do a single one of them.
Yeah, yeah. It's not a personality flaw. It's,
Yeah. Yeah.
it's yeah, absolutely.
Also, I take my medicine.
Yeah.
It's important.
Yes.
So easy
Yeah.
to forget.
That's what the timers are for, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
Some
Yep.
of the timers are medication timers. Yes.
We'll jump to maybe what has been her biggest help in her writing journey. It has the meds and the organizational, like, has that been the biggest thing that changed how you did things, or is there something more that like really helped you?
I think it was a combination
Mm-hmm.
of the diagnosis
Mm-hmm.
and then studying. Like, it wasn't just, oh, I have ADHD, now I understand it. I've been studying ADHD actually for the last 4 years because we found out that our youngest child has it, and we were out of our element. My
Mm-hmm.
husband and I, like, and our youngest is number 6, so we thought that we knew everything about parenting, and then our youngest comes along and we're like, oh, we know nothing. So I'd been studying this, specific neurodivergence
Mm-hmm.
and understanding kind of deficits, but also superpowers, if you
Right.
want to call if you want to call it like that. Uh, that's been tremendously helpful. The other thing for me was kind of a matter of will,
Mm-hmm.
where I had been talking up the game of writing. I mean, I wrote that trilogy between 2013 and I think 2016 was when the last book came out. And I did that when I had a little baby and a
Right.
toddler running around. But then as the kids were getting older and moving out and gone all day at school, all of a sudden I had this time. And I'm like, well, this is it. This is my time. I'm going to treat my writing as a career because I've been a stay-at-home mom for 28 years. So you're going to laugh. January of 2020, my goal was I'm going to start treating my writing as a career. I'm just going to get it nailed. And everybody came home in March.
Mm-hmm.
Husband, all the kids.
Right. Chaos just
Career goals.
descended. Yeah. The best laid plans of mice and men.
Yeah. So I had to, revamp, rework everything, pivot, I think is the catchphrase now.
Right.
But now I'm finally doing it. I'm finally doing much better at focusing my time and my energy and my efforts and finding really good resources.
Okay.
You just released your third book in your most recent series, right?
Yeah, that was in August, and then whipped up a little novella
Yes.
Oh,
and
nice.
released that in November.
Oh, wow.
So yeah, I'm moving along.
I love to hear it. So what would you say are good next steps if someone has written a book and it's just like, okay, what now?
They find their editor, they find their tribe, and then
You could have an entire podcast on these next
Mm-hmm.
steps.
yes.
So I will try to gloss over. Find it, you've got some decisions to make as far as, do you want to publish wide, which means, your book is available on Walmart.com's website
Mm-hmm.
and Barnes and Noble and Amazon, or are you just going to go with the powerhouse, Amazon? and be on Kindle exclusively. So you've got those decisions. You definitely want to, Kersha's mentioned a few times about finding your people. Absolutely, and how find your people, because the writing community, just like you mentioned at the very beginning of the podcast, we come together, we help each other. So like all these authors supporting Chelsea Banning, she set a date actually for her book signing, January 28th.
Yes.
Stephen King tweeted. He's like, let's go. She tagged Flava Flav.
I love it so much. Yeah.
But find your people, because they'll be able to kind of walk you through some of these first steps as you're, uploading your manuscript and choosing the cover and pressing that publish button.
Wonderful. What is your biggest influence in your writing? I know you said you've been influenced by a couple stories, but
yeah, wordplay.
Okay.
I love wordplay, and my favorite example. I mean, it's the moment that I knew I wanted to write for the rest of my life. It was in high school. I was reading in class. We were reading The Most Dangerous Game by Richard Connell, and he wrote it first person. The guy meets the antagonist, who he's packing heat. He's got a gun, and the narrator,
very polite antagonist, who informs him very kindly that you better get running.
Right.
Well, before he says, I'm here to hunt you, the guy says, well, I gave him what I hoped would be a disarming smile.
And
just that little, like, the light bulb went on, and I'm like, that's brilliant.
Right.
Just a little play on words. And so that's the thing. I used to read the dictionary for fun when I was 10, 11 years old. I love the English language, as problematic as it is.
Right. No, language is definitely a passion, I think, of both Kirsha and I. I mean, as authors, we love language, but just like the fact that we can communicate with others using these, like, garbled sounds or writings on a page, just scribbles and characters, and we can
love the
convey
nuance,
concepts, and all that stuff is very exciting for people. What do you do to break writer's block?
So I was thinking a lot about this. I don't have writer's block. I have writer's ass.
Okay.
As in a donkey, as in a stubborn mule, and I am my own worst enemy. I sabotage myself. So it's not writer's block as much as I'm not sitting down and opening up my manuscript, because as soon as I open it up, and there have been times where I might it's a blank page, and you can't edit nothing. So I'll just start writing. And I've given myself permission to write complete and utter crap.
Yes.
I think that's a really important thing to know and to do, to give yourself permission to get it wrong the first time.
Yeah.
Yes, to be messy and sloppy, and just get the story told to yourself first, and then we polish it for other people's eyes.
Yes.
Do you have any writing advice that you absolutely hate?
Yes.
So here's the thing about advice. If you're not looking for it, you're not going to appreciate any of it. And I was trying to think, is there any other career where if someone tells you they do it, like, oh, you're a gynecologist, you should totally use your speculum and dig tunnels, because you would be great.
Right.
So that's what I hate. I hate it when people find out you're a writer and they're like, oh, you should write kids' books. Oh, you should write.
Or I've got a story in me. I just don't have the time. Yeah.
So that's probably the number one thing that makes me crazy is people telling me what I should write.
That's hysterical.
That is
That's
very
a
valid.
really, really vivid way of painting it, for sure. You speculums, you'd be great at digging tunnels.
Someone would say that, I feel like, if the analogy does pay off, which it does. There's some very confused people in here that are like, what's a speculum? But, but yeah. I love that analogy because it is very true. Like there's no other career that people really feel called to comment on like they do when you're like, oh,
Yeah.
right, yeah.
Oh goodness, yes.
Yeah,
They're like,
how
oh,
fun.
so are you a real writer then? Or like,
Yeah, right. You have to qualify your writing, or they're,
Yeah.
oh, yeah.
And don't get me started on romance and the stigma of romance. You tell somebody that you write romance, and I'm like, oh, well, that's not even a real.
yes.
Like,
Right.
okay, tell that to the $1 billion flowing in and out of the book industry.
Right,
Yes.
right. And I think that people don't realize how hard it is until they go to try themselves. Like any writing in general. I went to school and I was fortunate enough to study creative writing at my school. And it was always the teachers were poo-pooing on genre writing in general, not just romance, but any genre writing was, not good enough or prestigious enough or literary enough or a number of things. And it's just like,
It's very elitist and dismissive, honestly,
is.
and kind of gatekeeping, like writing. Writing should
Right.
be available and open and
And it's like, tell that to H.G. Wells, tell that to Ray Bradbury, tell that, there's a number of, amazing examples of genre fiction that are wonderful pieces of writing. And even if you're like, okay, this isn't a wonderful piece of writing, it's still valid, right? There's still, not everyone wants to read, Chaucer or, on the weekend, right? Some people just want to enjoy a little escape time, and there's absolutely nothing wrong with that, and it's very valid.
Some of the most profound little
Mm.
pieces of wisdom I've stumbled across in genre fiction, to be honest.
I would agree. Yeah. I had a kind of, when I was a teenager, like, because I did grow up reading a lot of class. I was a very pedantic child. And so I was like, oh, I'm going to read For Whom the Bell Tolls, in middle school and stuff. And so it was just my first time reading a fantasy novel, though. It was just like mind expanding. That it's just like, okay, there's dragons in this world. There was so much more to the world than what I realized. And I love writing about magic and magic in my stories, even when they're horror, for example. Kind of like you say, you always write romance. I always find a way of incorporating magic into my stories because it was so impactful to me. Like I said, it just like opened my mind up to the possibilities. And, that happened reading a genre book, and it was very life-changing for me.
Yeah,
I love finding the nuggets of truth in fiction, for sure.
Right. And I feel like as an author, you can really learn from reading any genre. Like if you want to know how to develop relationships, read romances, right? How do we get to know people? How do we like develop that character, that relationship building in our stories? Like what better way to learn than to read a romance, right?
Yeah, I would even go so far as to say read all the genres, but read as much as you can.
Right, absolutely. Read often and read widely.
Yeah.
So thank you so much for joining us. We do want to offer you the chance to tell us where we can find you online and where we can, find your book. So
Thank you for that. I am at Love Vicky Holt, all one word, pretty much everywhere. If you look up at Love Vicky Holt, that's me on Instagram and TikTok and YouTube and Facebook.
Absolutely. And you said you just published the third book in the series. Do you want to tell us a little bit about the series?
I'd love to. Predator Planet. Book 1 is Hunted on Predator Planet, Tracked on Predator Planet, Hounded on Predator Planet, and there are 2 more books in the series coming. I rolled up romance, slow burn romance, with an incredible world building situation where, as I was writing the story and creating the setting, like very simple, like, oh, let's have it be a binary star system. There's 2 stars. Let's give it a twin planet. There's 2 planets. And then I was thinking, okay, there's an alien race that inhabits 1 planet, and then the males, the big hunky males, travel to the 2nd planet because that's the hunting grounds. And I'm imagining, how would this alien race develop a mythos and a religion if there are 2 planets and 2 suns, and they've learned over time that the animals travel together in sister pairs. They're going to create goddesses, sister goddesses. And it just turned into this wild, fun foray into culture, and just coming up with, obviously sister goddesses, matriarchal society. So you have these big hulking aliens who are a little bit afraid of women. And then your human women, the human women there's been an event. They land on this planet kind of 1 pod at a time. Some crash, some land. And they think it's uninhabited. That's why the AI chose it. They thought it was uninhabited, only to find out that it's like populated with dinosaur-like creatures. Everything on the planet wants to eat you, giant bugs. And so these women are forced to use their scientific knowledge and their courage and their demons to fight and survive. And they meet up with my alien hunters, and some sparks fly, and it's just fun. It's adventure. And
Vicky does something that not a whole lot of authors pull off successfully, I believe, where she has different protagonists every book. The first book follows Ezra, and I read that one, and I was actually like pouting because the next book wasn't going to have Ezra as the protagonist. And I was like, oh, there's no way I could love someone else the way I loved Ezra. And then I read the second book, and I'm like, I love Patty. Like, I love it's
Patty.
a new protagonist every time, and she really breathes them to life every single time. So part of when she's coming up with the next book, I'm like, tell me about the new protagonist. Who's our new friend? You know, like,
Right. I love that you have different characters you can fall in love with each time.
Yeah.
new
And
protagonist,
I
love
bring
interest.
the other characters in, and it's been fun. I've never done that really before, where you kind of still get to see the developing romance between the other couples, but also the cohesiveness as a group. And it's really becoming
And I challenged her. I'm like, there is no way you can make me love the alien Raxathana.
Raxathana.
Raxathana. I was like, you can't make me like him. I am determined not to like him. And then she starts telling me a little more, and I'm like,
I like it. I think frustration in the reader is a very good sign for a lot of authors. It sounds like counterintuitive, like you would think, like, oh, the reader's frustrated, that's a bad thing. But a lot of times it's for reasons like, oh, I wanted to hate this person, and now I like can't help but sympathize with them.
Even the grumpy aliens just really grow on you.
That's wonderful. So everyone go check out Vicky L. Holt's book. Thank you so much for listening, and join us next time when we'll be welcoming another guest on. And remember, there's always more than one way up a mountain. If you'd like to be featured on our show, please send us an email at thetellnotshow@gmail.com or leave a comment. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks again for listening. If you enjoyed the show, consider subscribing and liking. We appreciate all the support. Julia J.K. Allen is an author, editor, and coach, and can be found at hijinksrudder.com.
Kirsha Fox is an author, avid reader, gamer, and mother to four, and you can find her at kirshafox.com. Thanks and see you next time.